Hey there, we are back. I'm St-Pierre, you're listening to Go Podcast. There's no fluff in here, no intro music, and no sponsor. Let's go directly into the subject. I'd like to talk today about discipline. This is a skill that I think is required to build long-living software systems, things that needs to be there in 20 years. And, I'm guilty of not having put enough disciplines sometimes into some software that I built, and I've seen the repercussion of that, or at least the the hard time of maintaining those applications. So what I'm talking about in here is all the shortcuts that are often taken to reach a goal. And sometimes it might be driven by, management or any higher a higher department in your organization and whatnot. So sometimes it's very hard to fight the shortcuts that needs to be taken to reach business goals and whatnot. This is probably one thing that I, as an entrepreneur myself, I always fight. I have my engineering side that wants to take more times and make sure that what I'm going to build, or at least the code that I'm writing, is going to be, decently written. And there's the other side of me, which is the entrepreneur side that you, at the end of the day, you need to ship something. You need to move the needle, and this is a hard balance, in my opinion, to find the perfect way. And the downside of not putting enough discipline into your if your team does not have this threat, and if it's not part of your culture as a software engineering team, then it might be something that you should start to introduce to the team. This is difficult for sure, and it touches a lot of sphere of development. It goes as far as how many times that you or someone in your team change a piece of code, and let's say that there were a comment, a series of statements just above this thing that was kind of explaining the business reason for this piece of functionality, or maybe it was there is some explanation, and now the requirements change, or something change in the business that this is not true anymore. So I've seen most often than not, developers might change the code and not change the comment just below that. So the impact of that is very simple. 2-3 years down the line, when someone needs to return there, maybe it's a new one in the business, and they don't really know this part of the business anymore, or yet they don't know yet what. And now they read the comment, and they read the code, and they are completely not saying the same thing. This is a small example. This can happen as well with unit tests. The unit tests might still pass, but are they really still testing what the desired output is? This is extremely tricky, to be frank, and I think this is also why some people might not do as much testing as they should. Some people tend to, I've heard people say something like, oh, I cannot write test until I have my real implementation and whatnot. But sometimes it's very difficult to justify writing those tests, to be completely frank, and it takes discipline to make sure that you do have your bases covered, at least minimally. So where I was going with that, yes. So yeah, the unit test is a good example, because it can often be an excuses to just do the minimum and whatnot, and this is extremely dangerous, because at the end of the day, the test is what will help you. I would say it's one of the pieces that, if done right, will help you keep your system for a long time, because it will be easier to change, and you will have more confidence at the end of the day to apply any change. Also, it's very easy for someone new that just be onboarded into the team. They are probably more confident, and they might be more productive to write some code that won't break the system if the tests are good. So this takes disciplines, and we all are building, more and more distributed system these days. And what I've seen is, this is extremely difficult. This is not an easy task, and especially if you are not really putting much thought into it, and you just, you know what, I will plug an event system in here, and do some queues in there, and have a couple of services here and there. But the point is, the overall architecture vision of your system needs to be extremely clear. And I've been guilty of not doing enough documentation in my career so far. So I will again return to this acquisition of one of my clients, which I've built the entire software system. They were acquired by Equifax in January, last January, and it was really David versus Goliath kind of thing, but it made me realize that the documentation is also something that you really need discipline, because it's also getting out of date all of the time. And how do you maintain that, especially if there's no if there's no people dedicated to always keeping the documentation up to date? It's extremely difficult, and once it's out of date, now it's almost over. Nobody will want to update it, and it's extremely difficult to keep all those things in line, I would say. And returning to the distributed system, if you're not having any kind of correlation ID or something like that you can easily follow, what happened to a life cycle of a request, or call it what you want, any kind of process that starts and ends at some point and passes across multiple services. You still have a good way to know what's happening. And this is also something that takes discipline, I think. Having a good, it's not only a good logging mechanism, because we've all done some simple logging. It takes way more than just a log.printf to be able to understand what's going on with your system. So this is something that might be forgotten or not really accounted for when designing, or at least estimating the amount of effort that will be required for for building any kind of distributed system and things like that. So if you contrast that with the way that software was built, I don't know, 15 years ago, whatever, and I don't want to do any kind of monolith versus microservices or things like that, but I think the discipline now is required more than back then, because of, at the end of the day, we are, it seems like we are complicating a little bit our lives for some part, and let me explain that a little bit more. But a monolith is still extremely simple. It's still manageable to understand what's going on from the start of any kind of process to the end, and it's easier to debug, easier to get started with for a new developer, for example, that just come. So I'm talking easier by default. So for your distributed system to be any kind of have this simplicity as the monolith, you will have to put a lot of thoughts and be extremely disciplined to be able, to be able to write some code, write some documentation, make sure that everything is extremely easy for you in the long term. And I say you in terms of the company, the teams. So I've seen a lot of, I won't say half-baked distributed system, but it's still new. It's still not very not proven, but I don't know how to say that. It's not entrenched into our day-to-day way of doing things, I think. And there's lots of people doing that, but I believe that it's a little bit overseen, the amount of things that will need to be done correctly for the systems to be maintainable. And hopefully we can continue to improve ourselves. That's that's always the goal, to be a better engineer and whatnot, and maybe start asking, is our system needs to be as distributed or as decoupled or as cut into small pieces like that, or we are good with a decent core system with some satellite around it that that act as those microservices. But we need to be careful. We need to be extremely careful, because this will add a lot of maintenance complexity at the end of the day. And I can understand that multi-teams can handle multi-service and whatnot, but it's still complicated to make sure that, how do you test this distributed system? How do you make sure that you have some kind of, you are able to replicate anything that can happen into production to debug exactly the same situation, for example, or to be able to replicate what's going on in production. This is difficult. You have to account for the fact that new developers will need to how complex it is for a new developer to get up and running in the project. So if everything needs to be stepped out, if if they need to configure, I don't know, 100 services locally. So and yes, I mean, you can have Docker for lots of things and things like that. It can be just a Docker compose and boom, you're set. I'm just saying that this takes time to plan. This takes a lot of discipline to make sure that all of those things are correct, because those will really hurt in the long run. So all right, that was a quick episode, and I hope you are better than me at those things. So I'm still learning even after 23 years, whatever, of software engineering. All right, see you in a couple of weeks.